Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki Master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Charlize, and I am so excited to introduce my guest, Kathy Harmon-Luber. Kathy agreed to join me for an episode where we'll be discussing topics that, for anyone going through suffering, I think can really be insightful. Let me introduce Kathy. Kathy is an inspiring and compassionate, as well as empowering author and wellness guide whose passion is helping people navigate the challenging terrain of the healing journey. With insight and enthusiasm, it opens people's eyes to the potential of becoming physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthy by offering a toolkit of practical solutions. In her book, which is available on Amazon, which is titled Suffering to Thriving, Your Toolkit for Navigating Your Healing Journey, How to Live a More Healthy, Peaceful, and Joyful Life, Kathy shares her wisdom gleaned from decades healing from health crisis. Kathy is a certified sound therapy healer and a sound healing practitioner, as well as a Reiki practitioner. You can find her website at sufferingtothrive.com, and I will put links to her website as well as her book in the show notes. So let's get into the interview and enjoy. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining me as a guest of the Art of Healing podcast. I have to say that, you are the first sound healer I've had on. It just occurred to me, you're the first sound healer. So this is so exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. It's so good to be here, Charlize. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So I did have some questions for Kathy. Kathy has a book that she's published that I think is really a very important toolkit for anyone at any time, but especially someone who's going through a very hard time. The first thing I wanted to ask you, Kathy, in your book, you share your health crisis and what started you on your healing path. Can you describe for the listeners, for me, how someone even knows if they're in a health crisis? Like, how do you even know that? How did you know this was a health crisis?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Charlie. What I would say is, I think when a health crisis happens, you kind of know it. And here's my little definition for how we define if we're in a health crisis. And that is, it's a point in time in your life when you get the scary diagnosis or you've had a terrible injury, an accident, a chronic disease. What makes it a health crisis is when it changes your life in some way. And it may be in the immediate, like for months, you might have a problem that just really disrupts your life. It's the life disruption thing. I think that's how I would define it in a phrase. Or it might be something that affects you for the entire rest of your life. The crisis part of it is almost like the dark night of the soul. When your world has been disrupted so much, you need to find another way through it. The old life doesn't necessarily work so well for you anymore. And it's time to kind of look at things in a new way. And health crises, as you know, from working with your patients, can sometimes turn your life completely upside down. That's a health crisis. Yeah. And I would say that, according to the Centers for Disease Control, it's something like 6 out of 10 people have a chronic disease. 1 in 5 have chronic pain. So, illness, injury, pain, they're part of life. And if we're lucky enough to live long enough, every single one of us is going to go through a health crisis at some point, right?
As I was reading your book, what I found fascinating is because I am on the other side of the exam table. So when I'm
Yeah.
working with my patients and I'm in my analytical mind and I'm telling them, trying to educate them on the physiology, what's happening, it really, I have to say, it had not sunk into my heart. What is their experience?
Oh,
I have my side of it, but as you were describing your own health crisis, well, I never thought about, like, for what you went through with you had the issues with your back, I believe, and how that crushing pain just jolted and just turned your life upside down, essentially, correct?
it absolutely did. I've had a relatively challenging health journey my entire life. Ever since I was a little girl, I had, the asthma and upper respiratory things, and I had a lot of sports injuries going along. And then when I was in my early 20s, I got diagnosed with autoimmune, and I've been able to, through complementary medicine protocols, and things that we can drill down on later, I was able to manage. I still had this very, very active life. I worked full time with nonprofit organizations that make the world a better place. I was on some community nonprofit boards. I was hiking and biking and traveling and, doing all the fun stuff with friends and family and, just living what I would call the life of my dreams, even though I had all this stuff. And then that fateful day in December of 2016, when the fourth disc, spinal disc, which for your listeners, those are like little, almost like jelly-filled donuts that cushion your vertebrae and your spine. When I was in my 20s, I got diagnosed with a lot of serious spinal diseases. They said I had the spine of an 80-year-old woman at that point. But again, I was doing pretty well until 2016 when this fourth disc ruptured and it was completely debilitating. I was flat on my back for 5 years, actually a little over 5 years. It totally turned my life upside down. I mean, the pain was off the charts like nothing I'd ever had before. I couldn't walk 11 steps, let alone have anything that was even close to my normal life. And lying there in bed for just, what I thought was going to be a couple of weeks. And then it was a couple of months, and neurosurgeons said, you're healing. Your body is healing. Just keep doing the resting that you're doing. Maybe it'll be 6 months. Maybe it'll be 3 years. It was longer than that. And I always considered myself an overachiever and thought I would just like knock this out of the park, be back to regular life. I was not. And so I've always been a journaler since I was a little girl. I started writing all of these things I was going through primarily just to cope, to hold on to hope. I mean, as you can imagine, being flat out and in terrible pain, not having all of the things that you've ever looked to, like my art and photography, or I played classical flute concerts on weekends. I could not do any of that. What do you do? So I started doing just a lot of research on the mind-body connection. And what became really clear to me very quickly is unnecessary suffering is a choice. And that was something new to me. Like, certainly I'm not talking about the suffering the people in Ukraine or with the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. That is suffering on an epic scale. And I'm not referring to that, but the unnecessary suffering we go through in our minds when something disrupts our health. And for me, I realized pretty quickly that I could become a very complaining, bitter old woman one day. I could suffer for the rest of my life, or I could figure out how to make my mind my medicine, and not fake positivity, but finding hope, latching on to hope. And the other thing that became really clear during that time was this health crisis that I was going through and still am challenged with to some degree is part of this healing journey that I am on for decades in my life. That's part of my life's journey. And it's part of my soul's journey, because our healing journey is embedded in our life's journey and embedded in our soul's journey. And by that, I just mean our life purpose, what we came here to do, what our mission is. And once I began to look at things that way, it just opened a whole door for a different level of healing. It's like the late, oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name. The wonderful quote that I'm trying to remember
Is it Wayne Dyer?
Wayne Dyer, thank you. Yes, you read my mind. When
I used the little ratio.
Yeah, that worked. But when you look at things differently, the things you look at will change. And that is true of the healing process. I just had a total mind shift in that moment that has guided me all those years to try to find, and this is the hard part. It is simple, but it is not easy. How do you find the blessing in your health crisis? That's the journey. And that was really challenging.
You said something that's quotable, and I'm going to write that down, and I'll probably make it a little bit of a screensaver, listeners. Make your mind your medicine. It's very quotable. That's make your mind your medicine. Let's talk about suffering, because the one thing I found interesting in your book, and I like to think that I get quite a bit of reading done. I don't know that many authors delve into suffering in the way that you do. So why don't you describe from your perspective, what is suffering? This is a topic that a lot of us, we just internally don't want to go there.
No.
You get the little twinges. We just don't want to do it. I know even when I'm with my patients and they are describing their suffering, I can feel my own resistance, like, oh no, you don't want to do it. And even in my own life, like, oh, I don't want to think about my own suffering. But why don't you take us there? Why don't you describe suffering?
Yeah.
And if you can, describe steps we can take to rise above that suffering.
Yes.
And as you were saying, find the blessings in that suffering.
Yeah, I love this question. And it is a hard question, because we hear the word suffering and we immediately, our whole bodies react to it. It's like instinctively, we don't want to go there, right? But we can live in a place of suffering. And like I said, that can be physical, of course. And you want to do everything you can to help yourself through robust self-care, through doing all the right stuff. I write about in the book, in addition to your mind is your medicine, food is medicine, music is medicine, art and singing and all kinds of things can be your medicine. Nature is medicine. Your mind is your medicine. I keep coming back to that, because if we're suffering, we do all we can physically to help ourselves not suffer. And our doctors are a big part of that. Doctors have saved my life many, many times. And I'm sure that's true for many of your listeners. So we do all we can on that side of it. But then there's this other side, which is the part that we can control, which is our own self-directed healing journey. And there are a number of steps to that. Number one, figuring out where is your medicine. Every single person alive probably has a different definition as to what their, in air quotes, medicine is. In my situation, it is art and music. It's nature. Everyone has to ask themselves, what is it that makes me feel good, that helps me to get a little bit of respite from the agony that we're in, usually physically, but it also can be mentally. We mentally suffer. So that's the first piece of it. And I have three other pieces. My book is a toolkit of quite a number of short little chapters. Each one is a tool, and I'm pulling out the ones that I think made the most difference for me and the biggest difference for the people who I work with in my sound healing and Reiki that I have. Okay. So your mind is your medicine. The other one that is really important, that was a big shift for me. It's easy when something like this happens to us. We go through a little T trauma when we get the scary diagnosis, or our doctors say, my doctor said to me when I was in my 20s, you're going to be in a wheelchair by the time you're in your mid 30s. And I was horrified. That was a terrifying moment. It didn't happen, by the way, and I'm still not. But the point is, these things, our mind can go in that direction of saying, I'm always going to be, one day I'm going to be disabled, or I'm always going to be disabled. We don't have to live in that space. So what I like to say is focus on ability and not inability or disability. So what does that look like? I'm laying flat on my back, and all these things that I used to love to do. I can't stand at my easel and paint any longer. I can't paint watercolors, but I can sketch. I can't play my classical flute, which goes out to the side and torques my back in a very bad way. I can play Native American flute. I literally made a list, Charlize, of everything I could not do. And beside it, I said, what is my workaround? What can I do? And focus on that, and then begin to set daily goals. So what we're doing is rewriting our story. There was a time when I could not walk 11 steps. It was 11 steps to the bedroom door, and I could not walk that without a walker or my husband holding onto my arm to ensure I didn't fall. And it was extraordinarily painful. So I started setting little goals. Okay, I will do, the happy dance in my head, because I couldn't do it literally. I'll do the happy dance if I can get to 20 steps. And I'm thrilled to say I'm doing thousands of steps now, but it was incremental. The important lesson is everything in life is incremental, especially so maybe on the healing journey. And so trying to identify what I cannot do, and then turn it around and say, what can I do? What do I need? What kind of hack do I need? Do I need special orthopedic pillows? Do I need a back brace? Every person is going through a different challenge, as you well know. And so every person's list is going to be different. But the important thing is not to perseverate on what I cannot do, and this is what my life is going to be like forever. To say, oh, wait, I can take this one step this week, and let's see where that goes. Maybe that leads me to the next step and the next step. And the answer is yes, it usually does. And so it changes the energy behind our day when we can wake up and say, I have this little wee tiny baby step of a goal, and go in that direction. The other thing that was so hugely important to me was asking the right questions. And, every listener, I think, will understand this. We go to the place where we ask the wrong questions, which are on the healing journey. Why did this happen to me? Why me? What's going to become of me? What if this happens? What if that happens? Right? And we go down this negative spiral of just, bad thoughts about what our life. And when you're on a healing journey, it's really easy to go to that place, because all you do is a quick Google search and you can find out what the worst case scenario is. But what if we ask different questions? What if we say, this is an opportunity for me to reinvent myself, right? I can't do all that other stuff, but maybe something better awaits me. Maybe something wonderful is about to happen. Maybe in this moment, I can fall in love with one little thing in my new life. For me, I was writing more. I was exploring sketching instead of painting. I was doing a lot of things that up until that point, I was way too busy in life to find time for. And suddenly I had that time. And so it's not what we would put on the wish list, but it really can be a blessing if we ask those right questions. And then my favorite question is, what can I do today, right now, that my future self will thank me for? So I always had these goals, right? And so I was like, all right, what one little incremental thing can I do that gets me to a better place tomorrow? And I stacked up a lot of those little things, and suddenly life started looking a lot brighter, right? And so all of those things lead us to the third point, which is, your healing crisis. I kind of alluded to this earlier. It's embedded in this healing journey, which is part of your life's journey. It's not this random one-time event that happened to you. Maybe it's happening for you. Maybe it's happening to open your eyes to a different way of living. Maybe that different way of living is simply better self-care. Maybe it's letting go of everything that no longer serves you so that you can live a better life. So it just, see how good that feels? It just opens up all these questions of maybe there's something better in store for me that my healing journey is making possible. And so I love when I'm working with my clients, I love to take us down this road of exploring what is on the other side of this, or if there's not another side of this, if this is the rest of your life. How do you want to spend the rest of your life? Like, what is this? And knowing that, I think there's a wonderful quote by a guy by the name of Alain de Botton. And he says, and I'm going to read this for you because it's such a good quote. I know your listeners will love it. We should not feel embarrassed by our difficulties, only by our failure to grow anything beautiful from them. So the question is, right? What beautiful thing are you going to grow from this difficult situation that you're going through health-wise? And here's what I believe, and maybe others believe this and maybe they don't, but we're going through a really difficult time on Earth these days. Our planet environmentally is in peril. We've just been through this tremendously difficult pandemic. I believe that every person on Earth right now is meant to be here on Earth at this time. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has a talent, what the ancients would call their genius, right? Not meaning how smart you are, but meaning your gift that you bring to the world. And sometimes it's our healing journey, or any crisis, any obstacle, any challenge in life, doesn't have to be healing, that really smacks you down and gives you the opportunity of a little bit of time and space to examine where you are and maybe where your life could go in a way that helps you to be of more service to the world. I believe everyone has that gift. And I think everyone is unique. Sometimes we say, oh, that's not really a gift. It's just this thing that I do. But people in the world maybe need that one particular gift. Like, I look at your podcast and all of these wonderful segments that you do, and there's a message there for every single person, whether you're on a healing journey or whether you're just trying to get through another challenge in your life. That's your superpower. Everyone has a superpower of some sort, right? I believe.
Yeah. You voiced in everything in that big ball of warm fuzzies that you just delivered to the planet. That was a giant ball of love and wonderful. You voiced something that often I wish I could voice. And really, I haven't had a descriptor or words for it. A lot of that, which is when that health crisis comes, it's oh gosh, I don't know. Do I want to say a call to action? That your whole existence it's time to awareness of your physical body, your spiritual life, your emotional life, your karmic issues, You're
Yeah.
multidimensional. Like it's maybe telling you to start looking further. And
Yes.
that's not a place I often can go with patients because we've got so many of the nuts and bolts of their care. I love the way that you said that though, that it's usually it's an invitation to look. It's not
Yes.
just you're in this moment just to be punished. It's not that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe that. I love the word invitation. It is an invitation. And the funny thing about my story is I kept getting the call to action. I did. Every time I went through a health something, it was like I could feel it a little bit and I wanted to say it. I'd like to see my life going over that way. And that way that I would define is Reiki, energy healing, sound healing, writing this book. I couldn't have written this book had I not been on the healing journey. And, I didn't have that wisdom before all of those things happened to me. And so I have learned to look at it as it was an invitation and it is a gift. And sometimes when we're in the hardest part of it, it is hard to say, this is a gift and I'm grateful for it. Living from a place of gratitude is really important. And so, like, if you can't get to the point where you say, I am grateful this terrible health crisis happened to me, then, there are little baby steps you can take toward that. Gratitude is hugely healing. It's completely turned my life around. And I think, it's that I am grateful for being alive this day. I'm grateful for the wonderful people in my life. I'm grateful for the care of my entire medical team that takes care of me. I am grateful that things aren't worse. You start with the littlest baby steps of gratitude. And then one day you come through it and you say, oh my gosh, that healing crisis was a gift in my life. And that's where I'm at now. I've kind of come through the other side. I recognize that for some people who are very deep in the suffering, that's a hard thing to hear. And it's, I get that a lot where it's really hard to heal that. Hear that. I keep saying healing and not hearing, but it's hard to hear it and say to yourself, one day maybe I'll get there. But I'd like to say to your listeners, if you are in that terrible place, you'll get there at some point. Yeah.
So for the people who may be at that terrible place, who may be in the dark night of the soul, or who might be on the darkest part of their path, can you turn on a bit of a lamppost? Go ahead and turn a light on, if you don't mind. You had described you described multiple approaches in your book, how to map out your own healing. Yeah, and I know that's probably a big question, but can you share just maybe some of your brief tips, or just however you think, on how someone who might be in the darkest part can find the first step on their map?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Like I said, the book is 38 short chapters, and each one of them is a step toward getting to that roadmap, or what I call restorying, telling a new and different story about your healing journey and finding a way through it in a way that there's joy in your life and that you're thriving every day. But if you're just starting out, that is the hardest place, obviously, to be. It is the hardest place. But what I would say is, I think the one central piece to all of the tools in the toolkit and trying to create a new life, there's one central key. And that is what I call harnessing the power of our inner healer. Our inner healer. It's just another phrase for intuition, gut instinct, following your heart, right? And so how does that change your life? In many, many ways, actually. When I get quiet through meditation, or for those people who really can't do meditation, I understand there are a lot of people who don't. I work with a number of people who say, I can't quiet my mind. There are many ways of doing meditation, just sitting and contemplating, or listening to music, or so many things, sitting in nature. That can be walking meditation. There are many definitions of meditation, and I encourage people to find one way of slowing down, quieting the mind, listening to your heart, listening to your gut instinct. What is it I need to heal? And it gets back to that your mind is your medicine, and what else is your medicine? Is nature your medicine? Art and music maybe is your medicine? What is your inner healer trying to say to you? Maybe there's a part of your life that brought this on, whatever you're going through. And like in my situation, I was just doing too much. I had every intuitive signal that I needed to slow down, but my life was just too busy and I just didn't have time for self-care. When we listen to our intuition, we often recognize that our bodies are trying to warn us of one of a couple things. One is self-care. At one point in my life, I thought self-care was, every month or two, having a spa day, taking a nice long hot bath and candlelight and the whole thing. And I thought that was, self-care. Self-care is so much more than that. When we're really suffering on the healing journey, maybe we need to redefine self-care as whatever you need right now. What is your body speaking to you? That's what intuition is. I think Wayne Dyer said I'm quoting a lot of Wayne Dyer today, but one of the things that he said is if prayer is you talking to God talking to you is intuition, right? And so listening to that intuition that says, how do I need to take care of myself? How is my body telling me what I need to do? Do I need to just unplug for the day from work or life and take a nap, a longer nap? Do I need to get more sleep? What is it that my body needs? Am I eating the wrong foods? Food is medicine. So there's the intuition piece that if we just get really quiet, sometimes we hear that voice speak and say, and it's also the voice of our inner child if we've dealt with trauma. Dr. Gabor Mate has written some wonderful books, and one of my favorites is called When the Body Says No. In other words, if our bodies are saying no, no, you need to get more sleep. No, you need to stop eating those foods. No, you need to stop doing so much and slow down and take better care of yourself. Whatever our bodies are saying, if we don't listen, that's when we get the big wake up call, as I did in my situation. The other side of that is if you aren't saying no to the things that intuitively you don't want to do. If you end up in a situation where you're often saying, sure, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. No problem. I'll do that. Whether that's at work or with family or other responsibilities. And that is not the thing that you really want to do. If it's not your bliss, if it's not what you feel passionate about, but if you keep doing that out of a sense of responsibility. And a good example of this is, people who go into careers because their parents were in those careers, but it's not really what the person wants to do. Their parents were attorneys, but they want to be an artist or a musician or something completely different. And yet they go into it. Their body is going to say no at some point. That's what that whole book is about. And it's about, sometimes how to deal with the traumas, big T or small T. Adverse child experiences often have a lot to do, as you know, with some of the ailments that we can get in life. And so that's why I do mention intuition as a cornerstone of beginning to find your way out of suffering. There are lots more steps than that. One of the biggest steps is acceptance. Saying, this is where I'm at right now. For me, I was flat on my back. This is where I'm at right now. I have to accept that this is what it is for some period of time. That is not losing hope. It's just saying, this is my life. And if I can accept that for some period of time, this is where I'm at, and I need to let go of things that aren't serving me right now, or that I just physically or mentally or emotionally can't do, I'm going to be able to find more space to heal, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. So one of your healing modalities is sound healing. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that we haven't had a guest that it offers a specialty of sound healing. Can you describe what that is for us, if you don't mind?
I do not mind at all. And I'm so happy you asked that question because it is one of my favorite topics. And it's a big topic, but let me say this about it. Sound healing is not only like this growing trend in health and wellness. Like everywhere you look, you're hearing people talking about sound healing and music healing, but it is increasingly scientifically proven as a healing modality. And the part that I really love is that many hospitals and nursing homes across the United States, in Europe and around the world are offering sound healing. And actually, because you're a Reiki master like I am, I'll mention this too, but they're offering sound healing and Reiki energy healing as integrative modalities right there in hospitals and nursing homes. I love that. And the reason they're doing it isn't just because it's wonderful. Sound healing, or a sound bath, as it's often called, is nothing more than an immersion in sound frequencies. And having been a musician since a very, very, very young age, like I was starting piano lessons when I was 3 years old. So I've been in music for a long time. I've always loved performing classical flute and piano and guitar and stuff. But what I began to recognize a couple decades ago, I would begin to go like to yoga centers and hear a little bit of sound healing, drum circles, things of that nature. And I was really intrigued by it and I loved it, not even knowing that it was as healing as scientists are now finding out that sound healing is. And so, it could be anything from Tibetan bowls, singing bowls, crystal healing bowls, crystal singing bowls. The gong is one of the most healing instruments they found, and people scratch their heads and say, why the gong, Kathy? But it has the largest range of frequencies, including frequencies that we, with our human ears, cannot hear, both at the low end of the spectrum and the upper end of the spectrum. But why sound healing works, Charlize, is just like, I get very geeky about the science part of it. And this is very simply why it works. There are a lot of researchers out there sonic scientists doing research in partnership with medical doctors to find this out. And at UCLA here in California, there is a researcher by the name of James Jimzewski. And what he and sonic scientists have found is that every single cell in our bodies emits a sound. And each cell, based on their different tasks, has a unique sound. And the only time that they're not making that sound, and again, it's not something we obviously can hear with our ears, but they pick up with their instruments, their equipment. When they're not making a sound, it's usually because they are damaged cells, or they're injured in some other way, or they have stopped functioning because they're diseased. And what is fascinating to me is the discovery relatively recently that sound emitted at certain frequencies stimulates those dysfunctional cells to resume the role that they were created for. So if it's a heart cell, it is stimulated by a sound and it begins functioning again. And that pulls our entire organism back into healing. And so as a complementary modality, and I would always say, talk to your medical doctors first. I know that you tell all your listeners this, but that is the message. But then over and above that, begin to look at things like energy healing and sound healing. Go to a sound bath. But what is so exciting is there are things that we can do to stimulate the cells in our bodies that are free and easy. And a couple of them are singing. John Goldstein decades ago did tests to find out if a person is singing, their cells, their blood cells become more active and thus deliver more oxygen to the body. And as we know, oxygen getting to the cell. Isn't that fascinating?
Oh, I am so going to look that up. I did not know that, actually. Yeah.
I've got some links that I will send you for the science behind this. But the other thing is humming, and humming can be incredibly healing because it stimulates something you know well, the vagus nerve, which is the wandering nerve that helps regulate blood pressure and so many of the bodily functions. And so humming is something that we can do anytime, like, right, as you're cooking, as you're going for a walk, sitting outside under a tree, we can hum. Drumming is an amazing thing because it stimulates the heartbeat. And for people who don't have drums, you can tap on yourself, on your chest percussively. You can tap on a book or on a desk. But people ask, like, well, how long do we have to do these things? It takes 4 minutes for our bodies to come into entrainment, which is simply a fancy word for the cells in our body, the cells in our brain, beginning to vibrate at a similar frequency to that sound that is being emitted. And so there's that. But someone I've studied with, John Stewart Reed, he has found that in 20 minutes of listening to music you love, provided it's not, extremely loud and causing your body stress, listening to music you love for 20 minutes changes the cells in your body to become more active and doing their cellular function. And so that is huge. Anybody can do that. Put on 20 minutes of music you love, and you are helping your body to heal. And it goes back to what I was saying about the inner healer. Our bodies intuitively know how to heal if we give them everything that they need. Sometimes the sound is simply doing stress reduction. And we all know stress is so harmful to us on so many levels, right? For so many diseases, stress can be a trigger. I have autoimmune diseases, and stress is a big trigger for flare-ups. Sound can help us to come into this place of balance, much like Reiki energy can. So those are just a couple of tips that people can keep in mind and build into their everyday. And like we're saying, everything is incremental. And so if you can work into your day 20 minutes, it could be in the car as you're driving, just listening to music that you love. It can be humming in the shower or as you're going on your walk. There are things that we can do to help our bodies to heal optimally. Sound healing, Reiki energy healing, it's not a pill that is going to cure your diabetes, but it enables your body to come into a better state of its own innate healing. And that works in complement with Western medicine, right? So
I'd like to tag on when it comes to a healing modality like sound healing. And when I'm doing my day job, which is, using, prescription medications, those modalities, you look at risk factors or risk, benefits, side effects. So one thing, it's an easy one. What is going to be the worst thing that happens in a sound healing session? Right. Now, what's the worst thing that can happen with a prescription? So that's something I'll discuss a lot with my patients when we're picking what's going to happen next. Is like the one thing, and probably why I am so fascinated with a lot of these healing modalities is that what's the risk? What's the worst that's going to happen?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then when you start sizing that up, it's like, whoa, that's, if this is the worst that happens, we're great. So, Kathy, for the listeners who are wanting to learn more about you and who are ready to take the next step as far as your book, as far as working with you as a client, how can they find you if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, thank you, Charlize. Yes, thank you for that. The best way to find me is at sufferingtothriving.com. And there they can find out about my book. They can learn how to connect with me. I have a little bit about sound healing there and my Reiki practice. And my book, Suffering to Thriving, Your Toolkit for Navigating Your Healing Journey, is available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. But if you go to my website, Suffering to Thriving, you can find the link to the book there, as well as to my social media to connect there.
Listeners, I know that you are probably like most of us podcast fans, and you're probably in the middle of something, so no worries. You'll find Kathy's information in your show notes. And I also will be emailing out Kathy's information. And if you'd like to get an email of this, check your show notes and it'll be an easy way to sign up. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me. This was so much good and healing information. As you were talking, I felt so much of it, and I know the listeners, but I felt it applied to me. It was kind of, I was like, oh, wonderful. I can do that. I can, that's just your approach. It's so universal and so personal. So thank you so much.
And thank you for having me, Charlize. It has been an absolute joy discussing all of these things with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thanks. You can find more information on Kathy and her offerings at sufferingtothriving.com. You'll also see in your show notes an easy link you can click to get to her website, as well as a link to her book if you'd like to start on your healing journey. As always, thank you so much for being a listener on the show. It's such a blessing to be able to connect with you as listeners. It's a blessing to be able to connect with healers like Kathy, who so openly shared her story that is inspirational and can help all of us. As you're listening, don't forget that this is a small podcast production, so any sort of input we can get is great. So on the platform that you're listening, if you want to leave a rating and let others know what you thought of the show, if it was helpful, absolutely, please leave a rating. I would very much appreciate that. Also, if you want to share this podcast with your friends and family, send them a link. That would be great. We'd love to connect with more like-minded folks. And updates as far as working with me, I did want to let listeners know that I am working very hard to expand my offerings as an integrative physician, and I'm trying to reach out to as many people as I can. So pretty soon there's going to be the option to work with me as an integrative physician, and I will have more information about that in the coming days, weeks, and months. So I would definitely say sign up for my newsletter so that I can update you and you can learn how you can become part of the healing arts, health, and wellness practice. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.